are not a man, all right? Assuming you're not. I'm assuming you're a woman. You do not have the same fuel with which to accomplish tasks that men do. Did you know that you have 1/10 of the capacity to produce stress hormones like adrenaline and cortisol that men do because you do not have testes? Yes, they produce most of their adrenaline and cortisol from their testes. We only have our adrenal glands to do that. And if we were to rely solely on those to get things done, we would be burnt out, exhausted, overwhelmed, and just like totally inefficient, completely inefficient. This staying in a state of stress and anxiety to get things done around the house is simply not sustainable long term. What do you use instead? That's the question. What is your fuel? What is the proper feminine, womanly fuel? What do we use? And the answer is a specific kind of love, because men also use love as their fuel, ultimately. It's more stressful kind of love, but anyway. I will link in the description the 2 videos, maybe 3 videos on St. Thomas Aquinas and the Passions. 2 of them are on the Passions related. Passions are like emotions related to love and what love is. And then the 3rd one is on charity and how that perfects those, okay? So if you need to get a quick little intro to what love is, you can check those out. All right. So relying on Aquinas' understanding of love, I'm going to break down the difference between men and women and how we are fueled towards the good, towards achieving the good and creating beauty in our life and things like that, and feeling fulfilled. There are 2 forms of love. There's love as desire and love as delight. Love as desire is when the object that is good, the good object that you love, is outside of yourself. It's far away and you need to go and get it. See, that's the masculine one, because you need certain different hormones to go out and achieve and hunt and get what you need. And it requires just a different cocktail of emotions to achieve. The other form of love is delight, and that is what you feel when you already have the thing that you love. So you delight in it, you enjoy it. And those feelings are like warm fuzzies and contentment and fulfillment, and it causes relaxation. The love as desire causes stress because you have a lack and you need something. You feel empty. It requires effort because you're giving from empty. You ever feel like you're just giving from empty? Then you're using this hormone cocktail, these passions, to achieve your goals too much. Okay, so, where was I? Yes, so desire causes stress. A man's hormonal cycle is like rooted in desire. Desire is a huge part of his day, from a day-to-day point of view. From a woman's perspective, a woman's hormonal cycle, she is really only very desirous, you would say, maybe 1 or 2 days out of the whole month. Okay, so that's about how much your body has to work with when it comes to desire hormones versus delight hormones. If you've ever read any of the saints, they say, and we're taught this as Catholics, to do all things out of love. It's primarily love for God, and that's charity. But charity perfects nature. So doing things out of any form of love is going to be a good thing to do. And I'm specifically talking about love as delight. So what I have found exceedingly helpful and useful is when I muster up feelings of delight while I am doing daily tasks. It's a lot easier said than done, obviously, but once you do it and you get in the habit of doing it, it makes the tasks easy. It is not a struggle. It becomes very easy, and you get a sense of fulfillment. And you feel full, you feel abundant, you don't feel empty, like internally, your heart, you feel satisfied. So it's important to do that when you're mopping the floor, or get this, if there is any project you've been putting off because it's overwhelming you, what I have learned to do with this technique is to look at it and pretend that I love it. Pretend I'm so excited to tackle that project. I can't wait. I love it so much. It's going to be so fun. Like, it sounds like a total lie, right? But this is where I learned it from. You know how Marie Kondo was teaching everybody about how to be organized, and she's teaching you, like, this is how you fold, and this is what you do, and this is how you get rid of things. I was watching her emotional state. What was she doing differently when she encountered a big obstacle, like a mess and disorganized chaos, that the person who was struggling didn't do? The person who was struggling saw the mess and was just beaten down by it. Like, emotionally, they were like feeling like a failure. But Marie Kondo walks into the room, bright eyes, huge smile. You'd think it was her birthday. Like, you'd think she'd walked in on her surprise birthday party. So that's what I'm talking about. You need to face these problems like a delusional Marie Kondo with a big smile on your face, like you love it. Okay? Now, obviously, you have to do this consciously. So you have to decide to take the steps to do that. It's not going to come to you. You're not going to look at the pile of mess and feel that feeling automatically. You have to create those feelings and then face the mess. The particular hormones related to delight are primarily oxytocin and serotonin and some other ones. But what happens to your frame of mind when you're in this state of relaxation, state of joy, and state of delight, and maybe even ecstasy, because oxytocin can bring that much delight. What happens when you're in that state is... What, baby? What was I saying? When you're in the state of delight while you're doing a difficult task, it actually puts you in like a flow state. I don't know if you know anything about flow states. You can look them up. But what it is it's like a really good and efficient cooperation between your nervous system and your mind, so that you can get things done really easily, and you can learn really easily in this state, and you can accomplish tasks really easily. It flows. That's why it's called the flow state. And when that happens, your mind is more able to see and organize things properly. So you don't need someone else to tell you this is where you need to put stuff or organize in this way. You can just like intuitively figure out what organization works for you in that particular space, because every space and every mess kind of brings its own problems. You know what I'm saying? So there is no cookie cutter answer for how do you organize. But this is a way for you to internally put yourself in the right state so that you can organize efficiently. Let's talk about how to delight in your home specifically. Okay, so when I talk about conjuring up the sense of delight, I'm talking about warm fuzzies. Like, you should feel warm vibrations, warm sense of fullness in your literal heart. Okay, this is not being metaphorical here. It should feel warm. Like, you should feel that sense. You should also be using your imagination, because I believe that there's a real deep connection between, the heart and the imagination, because this state is a little less, it's a little bit less logical. Okay, it's the logic and quantities and measuring things and time, that's all up here in the cerebral intellectual realm. The heart kind of understands nuance, it understands body language, it understands imagery really well, signs and symbols, okay? So you need to use your imagination to sort of communicate with the rest of your body. You imagine how you want the space to look. It's a creative expression of what you want. And so when you are organizing your room, or you are rearranging, or even if you're tidying up, be in this state of delight and enjoyment, and just kind of like savoring the experience. Then you will subconsciously seek to beautify and perfect the space, your home. It will become a little sanctuary. It will impart beauty onto your environment naturally. And beauty then inspires love. So it helps you out. The more beautiful your environment is, the easier it is to get into this love state, and so on and so forth. If you're living in a total wreck and everything feels ugly and depressing, it's going to be a lot harder, but still doable. But the more you work towards creating this beauty and this beautiful environment, the easier it will become to do. All right. So I learned a lot of this when I was learning how to have a really good labor, because I've had 4 labors now. I'm a mother of 4, and I have had 4 natural labors, non-medicated labors, and this is what I learned this from that, and then I've applied it to other parts of my life, and it's really worked out really well for me. So that's why I'm sharing this with you now. One of the things they say in labor is to stop being so logical. Stop thinking in words. Like I was saying, don't quantify things. Don't think about difficulty or measuring effort. Don't think about measuring time. Don't put limits on things. Don't think in terms of limits, because that puts you up in this cerebral space, which really, it limits your capacity for making an impact on your environment. So that was the biggest. When this happens, like I said before, love orders. When you are love, and by orders I mean organizes. It puts things in its rightful order. So it's important. Love doesn't really do it on its own. It needs the intellect. It's like wisdom that really decides how things are supposed to be arranged properly. It's that combination of the heart communicating with the mind that allows you to see clearly what belongs where and what is proper, and what is a proper order for things. And you'll see you're start putting everything in order, not just your bookshelves and your kitchen cabinets, but you'll be putting your love life in order, your family life in order. You'll be recognizing and seeing very clearly where you belong in the order of your home and in the social order of your home and things like that. Because the hormone most closely associated with this state is oxytocin. Oxytocin is the big hormone for producing this feeling of warm fuzzies and love and connectedness, okay? And what this hormone does is not just this hormone, but the state, it heals you. Internally, it heals your body. Physically, it is the hormone that it creates a nurturing personality. It helps you with nurturing your people around you that might need help, people that are sick, your children, anyone that needs healed. It kind of organizes your inner life. It organizes your emotional life. It tames the passions. It tames your anxiety. It tames anger, things like that. And it consequently, your environment will start to reflect that inner state. Okay. The other thing that this love does is it enshrines. Okay. It creates an environment of beauty, of sacredness. It creates a shrine. And to do this, you do need boundaries, right? You have to recognize boundaries, not for the sake of your own heart. So as Thomas Aquinas talks about love, you love what is good, and then therefore you hate what is evil. So hate is not as strong as love, but it is ordered to support love in a sense, because it keeps the evil away from the good in your heart. So as you go about figuring out what is good and what is bad in your environment, just specifically for the house, be sure to recognize and alert yourself, your heart, to things that you don't like. If it's disgusting to you, feel disgusted. If the sink is disgusting, allow yourself to feel disgusted. Don't numb yourself to it to endure it. If you've been numbing yourself to your horrible environment, you don't actually, your subconscious still feels it. You still feel it. That's why you feel like crap, is because you can't really truly ignore it. So allow yourself to make those boundaries in your heart and be like, no, I don't accept this, that, or the other thing, that, and do it naturally. Don't do it as a top-down, order, commandeering kind of way. Do it as naturally as it arises. If you see something on the floor, go, ew, pick it up. I only had to do this. Try this as an experiment, okay? Spend the whole day, do nothing else. If you're having trouble cleaning up and things like that, do not force yourself to get stressed out to pick something up. Instead, simply feel the feelings of disgust towards what's around you. And then imagine the pretty and enjoyable space it could be. Do those two things. And pretty naturally, without even realizing it, you're going to start picking things up. And it probably won't even take a couple hours of doing that before your body just feels motivated to act in that way. All right, so yeah. So make sure you hate the evil, you put up those boundaries, you feel disgust when you are legitimately disgusted by things. But then also, there are some things which aren't really disgusting, like the untidy playroom, for instance. That's one thing. I put boundaries. I say no toys in my room, no toys in the kitchen. Obviously, the boundaries get broken all the time. So I'm constantly reinforcing them, taking the toys out of that room. But I maintain those boundaries. That way, the one room where you are allowed to have a certain level of chaos, toys everywhere for a certain amount of time, boundaries, right? That is allowable. And my heart knows that. Like, this is children at play. They are learning and enjoying. And this chaos, it comes with the territory of being a mother. So you can't like eradicate chaos or disorder, and you don't want to. You want to have it in its proper place, and you want to know and be comfortable with those where they are in your home, where those places are. So this exercise of love and doing everything out of love of delight specifically, not love of desire, this all trains your subconscious to know in which direction to act, okay? It trains your subconscious to do the work so that you don't have to consciously, stressfully, intellectually, logically plan, organize, goal set. Like, you can do all of you do need to plan, organize, and goal set to a certain degree, but it should not be your whole main focus. It should be something that you do to set your mind in the right direction, but this is what you do to set your heart in the right direction. Now, for the good stuff, prioritizing your husband. Part of getting your home in order is getting your heart in order, and the first place that you get your heart in order is with your husband. So people are more important than things, and you will understand this hierarchy of the importance and value in things becomes very apparent when you start doing this. So obviously people are more important than things. Obviously your husband is the most important person in your life. So his needs, his desires come first in your life, okay? In your heart. Outside of yourself and your own needs and your desires. It's kind of natural. You want what he wants. You want what he needs for himself. And not everything that's good for him is necessarily good for you. And it's not necessarily what you desire or you want, and that's okay. But you can, part of being a friend and friendship is wanting and wishing and helping the other person achieve the goods that they desire. You know what I'm saying? Okay. And the number one good that he desires is you, body, mind, and soul. So you know that. You know what his needs are. And his primary need is to feel loved by you. So you need to love him generously. And once again, you don't need to love him from a place of desire. You don't need to get into your masculine set of hunter and desire, and you lack something and you need and it's passionate, like that passion. You don't need to always enjoy your husband from that side. That's a very masculine way of looking at sexuality, and it is pervasive in our culture. That's like the only way of viewing sexuality. So I challenge you, if you are struggling in this department, because obviously most women do, it's a huge topic of conversation. Our biggest desire is during the ovulation time of our month, and it's 1 or 2 days out of the entire month. You know, if we were to wait till desire to enjoy our husbands, and they desire us every day, then they're starving, you know, they would be starving. So that obviously cannot be the love from which you are made by God to love your husband all the time. Obviously, here and there, yeah. But all the time, no. And so don't beat yourself up if you don't feel that, if you're not in that mood, you know, you're not in that mood, that's fine. You don't need to be in that mood to enjoy and delight in your husband and to feel affectionate towards him. You don't need that. And you can have a very delightful time with your husband by just being in that place of delight and oxytocin and coziness and connectedness and lovey-doveyness, okay? And I think this is important for husbands to understand too, so that they can help nurture that feeling and that side of love for you as well. So if you communicate that to him, I'm sure he'll be on board with that. So let's see. So you need to delight in him, especially when you're not in the mood of desire. I already said that. All right. The other way that you delight in your husband is non-sexually, is by delighting in everything that he provides for you, in the children primarily that he has provided for you. Like your greatest joys in life are your children. Delighting in your children, letting him see you taking delight in your children. Delighting in your home. You know how much he wants to help you make a beautiful home? Like, I'm sure he's not the one with all of the creative genius for it. He's relying on you to have that for the most part. But he's there willing and able to help make those dreams a reality. And he wants to be a part of that with you. And he loves that you delight in the things that he provides for you, and recognizing and appreciating that they come from him primarily. Because this is that masculine and feminine relationship that we live in, for the most part, in this state of delight, in this love as delight, as having received a gift, received the good already within ourselves. And that's because our husband lives in this state that's more going out of his way to acquire the good, to bring back to us. That this is the natural sort of symbiotic relationship that God has created in man and woman. So it will feel very cooperative and efficient and delightful, enjoyable. So what goes along with this big time is submissiveness. Now, if you struggle with the idea of submissiveness, that's probably because most of the world, especially Protestant Christianity and liberals in their rejection of that, they see the woman's submissiveness as like a slave to a master or a servant to her Lord. And that's not at all the Catholic traditional way of viewing this at all. It is more of a queen to her king. So she has her inherent dignity, and you have to recognize that and be confident in your sphere of competence. Your home, your children, the world of nurturing and socializing, this is your sphere of competence. And if he's making any sort of big decisions regarding this realm, then he needs to be respecting your opinions on these things. So if he is a good husband, he will recognize that you have a different set of competencies, and he will respect your competence in certain matters, okay? So while he's respecting your competence as the queen of the house, you need to respect his competence as the ruler of the house. So he is not your slave master, but he is the king of your heart, of your home. So he ought to be respected, and specifically in his judgment, because while the woman is the heart, the man is the head, and he might see things more clearly than you do, and just accepting that as a reality, that he could possibly see things more clearly than you, is going to help you long term. So after you have discussed everything thoroughly, you can trust that his decision might have a better perspective on it than you, and you can trust his perspective, generally speaking. This goes along with the biggest aspect of submission. Because submission isn't really following orders, obeying commands. You remember that part in the, what's it called? The Sound of Music. I love this part. In The Sound of Music, when the dad, who's the military man with all those kids, has his whistle, and there's a different whistle for each kid, and he calls them all down by their specific whistles, and then he tells her what her whistle sound tone is, and he runs his house literally like a Navy captain. I think that's what he was. He was a captain. And as he hands her the whistle and walks away, she blows the whistle at him and says, "What's the whistle I use for you?" And then like promptly doesn't use the whistle system to call the kids, because it's absurd, right? Like, this idea of obedience and authority is not one of a military captain on a ship to a subordinate, okay? I'm sure there's some level of that. You can make comparisons, but the order and the structure is much more organic than that. It's less logical, more organic. And to have a more organic submissiveness, it comes from the heart once again. So how do you orient your heart to be submissive towards your husband, so that even if you disagree with him objectively, and you maybe even disobey his command, you can know that you are actually truly in your heart being submissive, because you primarily are submissive to God first and foremost, but you're submissive to your husband by presuming his goodwill towards you. Never assume he's your enemy. Never assume that the decisions he's made are because he hates you. He didn't marry you because he hates you. And if he's come to hate you, then the surest way to make sure he hates you is to always assume the worst about him. So assume that he is well-intentioned towards you. Assume his goodwill. Assume that you're friends. If anything comes up, any disagreements come up, and there's two ways to take a situation. Like, you could take it and run with it that he hates you, or you can take it and run with it that he's cranky because he didn't get enough sleep last night. Make excuses for him for the most part. Obviously abusive situations are something entirely different. I'm not talking about that. But in general, make internal excuses for him and presume his goodwill. So that is how primary way that you are submissive towards him. You assume his goodwill, and you are certain of your own goodwill towards him. You just be confident that everything you do is well-intentioned towards him, so that if he comes up and says to you, I feel like you did X, Y, and Z because you hate me, you can reassure him, honey, I don't hate you. I'm really simplifying this. I did X, Y, and Z because I had a different perspective from you, and I thought I was doing something good for you. And then he goes, oh, okay, so she does love me. I just took it the wrong way. This is like the number one way of miscommunication in a relationship. And if you can make sure your perspective is always, he loves me and I love him, and anything that appears otherwise is something that is probably a difference in perspective, and we need to work that out and come to a conclusion about it. On top of this, you both of you, as you know, we know your wills are, you're striving to have your will united to God's will, ultimately. You want this human love that you have to be transformed into charity, right? So you want to be loving with God's love itself. And so that's how you can disobey your husband if he is objectively, and you can use your reason, you do have a sense of judgment, you are not a child. If he is making a decision which is objectively and truly contrary to the good of the whole family, like, you do have an obligation to, or right to, stand up against it. Okay, if there is abuse and things like that, don't feel like you somehow have to love it out of him or something like that. No, you build your boundaries, and if there is evil emanating from him truly, then have those boundaries around your heart. Okay, but abusiveness aside, don't presume hatred, don't presume evil, don't presume that about him. Presume the good about him. Okay, now, so that goes along, okay, respecting his judgment, support his role as the ruler. Do not let him delegate the role of ruler to you, and do not take it from him. Okay, a lot of times the guys online are always like, don't let her, usurp your authority. Well, how many women are dealing with men who are trying to delegate their authority, trying to get out of the tough decisions and pass the buck, right? Don't let him do it. When he is asking for you to make a decision, don't make the decision. Just the way he squirms out of it, you squirm out of it until he has to be the one to make the decision. And just keep practicing that until it becomes comfortable to him that you are okay with the decisions he makes, because that's really the insecurity with why he's trying to delegate it, because he wants to do what you want to do. Okay, he wants to please you, he wants to build the home that you want, so to do that you have to have a clear communication. So you can say, well, this is what I would like, but that doesn't necessarily mean that you've made the decision, right? So don't let the decision part fall on your shoulders. Don't fall into that trap. Keep that on him. The other way, they value and esteem his occupation. Whatever it is that he does, he loves his hobbies, his work. Value it and esteem it. Praise him for it. Like, you don't have to praise him because men don't really need praise as much as women do. But when you're with other people, talk him up if it comes up naturally to do so. If you're networking with people or socializing and your husband happens to do something really well and someone needs help in that area, be like, oh, my husband can probably do that. Here's his number. You can work on that, or, don't volunteer him for things, but it just, in conversation with others, make sure it's clear that you are proud of what he does and you value what he does in his occupation in life. Also, what goes along with that is valuing and esteeming your state in life. So this is assuming you're a stay-at-home mother. The world really looks down upon it, but there's no reason for you to. It's a very valuable, inestimably valuable role. And so love it, cherish it, be proud of it, and be glad to God that you have a husband who supports it, and really appreciate that. Even if you have to work outside the home, which many women do out of necessity, that doesn't, as Thomas Aquinas says, I'll have another video linked on Thomas Aquinas' rules of men and women, there's nothing innately wrong with that. It just puts more stress on a woman, okay? So it would be more ideal not to have that. But if that is part of your life, that's totally fine. Totally fine. No judgment there or anything. All right, so next, care for children. How do you care for your children? This one, there's a million different parenting perspectives, parenting guides, and parenting gurus. And I'm not a parenting guru, but I am a parent. And what I do as a mother is I bring this same philosophy of delight, staying in a place of delight for the most part. There are occasions when you will get stressed out or when you need to lay down the law. Once again, drawing boundaries with your children is very important and healthy. But what's more important that goes along with those is building rapport with your children. If you've ever heard of building rapport, but it goes along with this idea. I didn't mention that with the submissiveness to your husband, but I'll mention it here with the children. Maybe it'll make more sense. You want them to do what you want. You want them to want to do what you want, okay? It should not be a struggle. Now, obviously they're learning, and children have very rebellious wills, and we're not perfect in our training of our children, but the end goal is to have them want to do what you want. Have them be on the same page as you. You are on the same team, You are not enemies with your children. So if you feel like you have a child who can do no right, can do nothing right, you need to switch your perspective. It's coming from your heart. And you need to start thinking in terms of they can do no wrong. Even if it's just to bend back. Aristotle says when something is bent the wrong way, you kind of have to bend it back more the other way until you get it straight. So you might have to do that for a while, where you assume that they can do no wrong, just for a little while, in your heart. You don't have to tell them that. But just to change your perspective, so you start seeing the good in what they're doing. Because this is a legitimately studied phenomenon. When you are in a state of fight or flight, state of stress and anxiety, you literally see problems where there are no problems. You're convinced that there is this negative thing going on that isn't there. You assume the worst about someone's intentions and things like that. So that aren't true, that are objectively not true. So you need to not be in that state of fight or flight, state of animosity towards anyone in your home, towards your children, towards your husband. You're all on the same page. You love them all. They are all your family. They're all in your heart. And you delight in them and love them dearly. So, priorities. Your priority is having a gentle and merciful spirit towards them. It is more important to err on the side of mercy as a mother than to err on the side of authority. Okay? Because God is more merciful to us. This is really a divine thing. And I know I'm probably going to get a bunch of hate in the comments saying, oh, spare the rod and spoil the child. Yeah, and if you use that rod too much, you totally destroy the child. You know what I'm saying? It's very disheartening. So we are trying to create a rapport with our children so that they want what we want, for the most part, okay? And yes, you do have to use discipline and coercion and all the other tools in the toolbox to get them to obey you sometimes. But the goal that you're seeking is for them to want to help, to want to do what you want, to do it before you even ask, right? So to get that, you befriend them, you care for them, you nurture them, you are gentle with them, you are sweet with them, you look them in the eyes, you communicate with them, you understand them when they are emotionally losing it, throwing a tantrum. I mean, you don't stand for the tantrum. You say, go to your room. But afterwards, you can say, yeah, I know, I understand how that feels. Let them know you understand how it feels when they are upset and things like that. And then you give the correct, but, this is the truth and this is how we actually need to behave in this situation. All right. It is better to be seen as weak than strong as a mother. Better that those strangers out there think you're a weak mother than that you're a strong, domineering mother, okay? So err on the side of weakness and tenderness for the sake of your children. Don't fear being judged as weak, meek, tender, and doting. Don't fear it, okay? Banish the thought, okay? It's better to be weak as a woman. All right, what next? Enjoy, delight in your children. This doesn't necessarily mean you play with your children, but yes, do some play that you enjoy with your children. If they're coloring, engage in that activity with them. If you're playing games as a family, find things about them. Listen to their stories. Listen to what they want to talk about. Watch shows with them that they like to watch and talk about them like they're actually interesting. Some of them are. If they're not, find shows that actually are, so that you're also instructing them in good culture. All right. So when you set boundaries with them, because you have this, part of love is setting boundaries. When you set boundaries with them, do it without hostility. Assume their good intentions. Assume their good intentions. Always, 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 always assume their good intentions and let them know. Say that. I know you meant well. Okay? They will really trust you wholeheartedly. If every time they do something wrong, they know that they didn't mean to, that they're not evil inside, that they're not trying to be bad or anything like that. Like, that they meant well for the most part. All right. And then give affection generously. Be affectionate. Physical affection. Give it generously. Do their hair, play with their hair. Make them look beautiful to you. Make them look appealing to you. That goes with love, Beauty inspires love. So when you're in a state of love, you create beauty. And it's a loving, symbiotic relationship. All right, so set your heart on the true, the good, and the beautiful, and firmly denounce lies, evil, and the ugly. As you encounter them, don't necessarily make it all logical or heady or like make a spreadsheet of everything. I denounce this, but as they come up, be like, nope. Be very quick and clear, and make those, put up those boundaries as they're needed. But emotional boundaries in your heart, because it's so important. This is the big one for me, because you know how when something horrible happens, right? Somebody does something horrible. The natural response of the community is to be repulsed by this person. How could they? I could never. That is just terrible. What a terrible person, right? Those are healthy things. That's a healthy reaction to have towards someone who's done evil openly, okay? You need to be repulsed by evil, okay? So that you can be directed towards good. Notice like the big liberal big liberal thing in Hollywood right now is to understand the evil person, understand that could be you. Like, it is really messed up. And if you take that attitude, you will become an evil person, because you will become familiarized. You'll familiarize your heart with evil, with immorality, and it will be familiar to you. And then doing it will become natural to you. So never let your guard down about those sort of things. And this is why I hate that all the dragons now, they used to be considered evil, and now every dragon in every movie is good. It's like, come on, give us something evil to fight against in our imaginations, in our hearts, so that we know how to fight the dragons in our hearts. And you see this with the biggest moral evil in our day and age, abortion, right? If that baby was born and a mother pulled its arms and legs off and crushed its head, people would put her in jail and call her crazy, right? Like, there's something seriously morally wrong with you. But you do that when the baby's inside the womb and somehow she's praised. Ooh, no. You need to draw those emotional, moral, spiritual lines, because if you start letting in that evil and saying, oh, well, there is a place where evil is okay in the womb, when it's small, then it's okay to do these heinous crimes. Then it first of all, it's not true. So it's a total lie. So you've now accepted a lie, and you're emotionally accepting crime, and it's going to propagate. It's going to multiply in society, in your heart. So don't even allow it for an instant. Draw those lines. All right, so on a different note, let's talk about oxytocin. I mentioned that oxytocin is really the hormone that facilitates the fuzzy, warm feelings of social connectedness. And that's what studies have discovered. It enhances intricate social activities. It understands nuance because it reads body language. It reads everything. Like, it is that subconscious part of you that is looking for all those little details. It's very observant. When you are in a state of oxytocin, your mind is very, very alert and aware, and without even realizing it, which is why you can be so creative in this state, because it's putting a million pieces together that you can't even logically think through all in one. It's doing a million things at once. So in your mind, it's doing that. So it interacts with neural pathways responsible for processing motivationally relevant stimuli. So what that means is it interacts with neural pathways that's in your brain, which are responsible for like that dopamine, habit formation, motivation. So it interacts with your motivational processes in your body. It sharpens mind reading skills. This goes back to that part about wanting to obey before the command has even been given. Like, you know what they want before they even tell you, and they probably don't even need to tell you, right? It's that mind reading skill, that ability to recall and remember at the right time and the right place what this person likes at what time. Anyway, it sharpens that mind reading skills. It enhances our understanding of other people's perspective. It allows you to do perspective switches. You can see things from your husband's perspective, from your children's perspective, from not God's perspective, but you play around with perspectives very easily when you're in a state of oxytocin, which is why you're able to empathize. You can see from their perspective. You place yourself in their vision, and you see, oh, this is how they're feeling, and you feel for them. And this is why the imagination is such a big part of the heart and of exercising this love. It modulates the evaluation of trustworthiness. Okay, trust is a huge part of the oxytocin system. Okay, when you feel trust towards your husband, trust that he is goodwill towards you, trust that your children love you, trust that God has the best in mind for you. When you are in the state of trust, you actually have a better ability to recognize trustworthiness in other people. Because you can read the micro expressions on their face. You can tell if they're lying by their words, by their actions, by just the look in their eyes. Okay, you become very astute to these sort of things because it's important for our women's safety. It's important for our safety to know who we can trust, right? And that's why all of these cultural things exist. Like I talked about in the last video on traditional gender norms and customs. These traditional customs, these customs that denote gender, are no different than the customs which denote different occupations. They give us a language in which our subconscious can understand who is trustworthy or not, whose words and actions are matching up to the image that they are presenting. And so that's how the subconscious is able to evaluate the trustworthiness of someone's character. Okay, what produces oxytocin? Dim lighting, romantic candlelight, physical affection, big time, touching skin to skin, warm temperature, face-to-face eye contact. These things are all big boosts to oxytocin, big time. Using your imagination to imagine maybe a romantic encounter with your husband, that produces a lot of oxytocin. Imagining a safe sanctuary, a citadel in your heart, like that will make you feel very oxytocin full. Okay, oxytocin supports the parasympathetic nervous system, which is the rest and digest nervous system. This is why love is very much associated with food and drink, and women in the home are very much associated with providing meals and creating this restful environment, because this is the nervous system, the vagus nerve, the parasympathetic nervous system, which is attuned to this part of the body of resting and digesting, enjoyment. It also nurtures social bonds for obvious reasons. It builds cooperation. It inspires cooperation in others. It can help people will feel your oxytocin, you are emanating oxytocin, they will feel it, and it will produce effects in them as well. They did studies on this with dance. People who had oxytocin before were dancing in a better pattern and a more geometric pattern than those without it. It produces harmony, builds cooperation, and general psychological stability. It's that stability of knowing that you are full, you are at rest, you have an abundance, you are grateful, you have blessings, you are blessed, you are loved. So this state of delight, oxytocin state, is psychologically stabilizing you. It will remove anxiety and stress from your heart and your mind and your nervous system. And over time, you will be able to sort of, what's the word? Get yourself used to this state of being so that you are in this state as your normal. This becomes your normal. Okay. So, so there's certain techniques for getting into this state. Breathing is one of the big techniques. Just physically, what is it? There's one that's like 2 breaths in, 1 breath out. It mimics a sigh, how your body sighs. That will immediately click you into this state. Doing 10 slow breaths where the exhale is longer will also calm this nervous system, the vagus nerve. Changing your environment is really big, really key. Your environment has a huge impact on your state of stress. So those are some big ones. Mental reframing is the biggest. Mental reframing is the biggest one. The way I immediately mentally reframe is gratitude. I immediately start looking for things to be grateful for, and that clicks my perspective. It just flips a switch, and I go from stress to love, just like that. It's wild, and it just centers and orders my passions, my emotions, and banishes the anxiety. So I encourage you. I've done some videos on gratitude as well. You can go watch those if you're interested. There was one more thing I wanted to talk about, which I cannot remember. I didn't write it down. But I will link, if you haven't looked it up from the previous video, I will have linked the duties of wife and mother. What are her duties? Beautiful. We basically just walked through what your duties are, okay? This is from St. Peter Julian Eymard. And according to him, a wife's duty is, so we know that the husband's duty is provide, protect, and rule. A wife's duty is nurture, homemake, and submit. Okay, those are the cooperative duties. Well, her duties are primarily to esteem her state in life. We talked about that. To love her husband. This is a duty. You have a duty to love your husband. You have a duty to love your home and to serve your family, loving your children. This is it. This is the heart and soul of your duties. That's it. I've got 4 pages on what the duties of a husband are, and it's a lot longer. And I will list both of these, the duties of the husband and then the duties of the wife. And you'll see it's very different. But when I read that, what? My duty is simply to love? That's easy. Like, I can do that. You know, like, there's not a list of things that you have to accomplish. You know, it's not your duty is to keep your kitchen clean or something. Your duty is to do your best in the state of life that you're able to do it, and to do it out of love. Okay? Primarily it's to do it out of love. Do your best out of love. So if you can do that, then you're on the right track. And everything else is going to click into place. And over the years, you're just going to get better and better and better at doing everything. And your home will be tidy when it needs to be tidy and not when it doesn't need to be. And you'll be able to know the difference. And you'll just have an inner sense and an inner confidence for how your home needs to operate and how it needs to operate when it's operating at its best, at its most loving. So that is the nutshell of how to be a woman, how to be a wife and mother, essentially, how to love your husband, love your home, and love your family. And I hope this helps. Like I've said, this is all everything I've learned from trial and error and a whole bunch of reading, but mostly trial and error. And one of the biggest errors I made when I started out with this was I didn't put up boundaries when I ought to. So there's some wiggle room. Like, there's some room to see, like, oh, is this really disgusting, or is this level of cleanliness okay, or is this level of tidiness not good enough? There's some wiggle room. But once you know, no, that's too much. You know, and your heart knows, and you need to be clear with yourself. No, this is where I draw the line. This is where my heart feels best. This is what I have come to understand is the most reasonable. You know, you have to trust yourself and draw those lines confidently. So, yes, go forth and love and feel warm fuzzies in your home, for your home, and envision the beautiful home that you want, and delight in your husband and delight in your children, and live long and prosper. And I will see you in the next video.